Hello traveler, and welcome to this very special series of non-duality. My name is Gabriel Lugo, and I want to take you on a journey today in this first video, which is going to attempt to explain the basis of why we are on a hero's journey. And this is why I'm borrowing from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey to explain a little bit of my premise of what reality is and why, although we cannot escape the wheel of life or the hero's journey, we can certainly be liberated from it. And that is my intention here. Now, I'm pretty sure that you have had a sort of awakening, or what I would like to call an expansion of consciousness in the recent past. Perhaps you have been dealing with this for a long time. And you have been seeing a lot of what we call dark night of the soul, which is the process in which we have to battle with ourselves in certain situations, and out of it we come out with some results, and so we feel like we improve ourselves. However, this is just a cycle of life, and you may be struggling with trying to integrate these rewards, these experiences, these concepts in your life, and maybe you've been having trouble. So hopefully with this video, I want to show you a couple of cycles that I think are important to study and then realize why they're so applicable to our life and to our experience in general. And so, like I said, even though I'm using Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, I'm also using the Wheel of Light from the Hindu tradition. I'm also going to use the archetypical minds that we study in the raw material. I'm not going to explore them specifically, but I'm just going to mention them so they make sense in the cohesive way, so you can understand my point as to why this is the basis of life in which we live, and all our experiences are literally rotating around and cycling, orbiting. And so before I start explaining you this first part, which sounds a lot like The Hero's Journey from Joseph Campbell's book, I want to read something that he said that I think starts this beautifully today for us. In one of his books, Joseph Campbell was asked, if the journey of the hero is the search for the self, then what is the ego and what is the self, and what is the relationship between the two? Campbell replied, the ego is you as you think of yourself. You in relation to all commitments of your life as you understand them. The self is the whole range of possibilities that you have never even thought of. And you are stuck with your past when you're stuck with your ego. Because if all you know about yourself is what you found out about yourself, well, that already happened. The self is a whole field of potentialities to come through. The key thing that I want to take out from this is that 1, the ego is only you in relationship to the past, and 2, the self is a field of potentialities, which we could definitely explore a lot more as we get closer to realizing who the self is. The self is not something specific or defined. The self is something that is ever changing, and that change is what we feel is the hero's journey. So I want to interpret the hero's journey in my way here, and these are some of the aspects that we see, and it's not exactly, like I said, from Joseph Campbell's description, but it explains the same thing. And I want you just to bear with me in my explanation of how things work as a cyclical process in our minds. So the you that you think you are is always a neophyte that has no knowledge, no understanding of anything that is happening. And the motion, what starts the motion is always the desire to do something. That desire is met with some resistance at some point as we find the opposite of what we're trying to achieve and what we have to overcome. This is a simple process in our psychology. Now, this resistance is going to lead us to a sort of suffering in which we're going to struggle to find the solution to whatever the problem is. And a key thing to realize here is that there was no problem to begin with. We created a problem from desire. And so because we created a problem with desiring something, we're already laying the road into which we're going to suffer to try to achieve that which we desire. And even if what we desire is not something that we're going to achieve, at the end of the suffering, there's always a sort of reward that is waiting for us there. And this is how we continue to bite into the bait of the cycle of life, the cycle of doing something to achieve self-improvement, to become something better, to acquire those things that we don't have. We always start with this cycle here. And then at the end, we have what it's called transformation. This transformation is how we feel about ourselves after we have gone through this ordeal of experiences and situations and so on. But in the end, as any cycle, you end up as you again. And this you is that field of potentialities. Now, first of all, I don't want to say that this is a bad thing to do. This is the natural thing that is happening to us all of the time. And we're being, as it were, guided by this force of nature that is making us go through this cycle of life. So you can see that there is no escape from this, because that is the reason why we're here, to experience life as a hero's journey. However, there is a point of liberation, and I'll get to that. But I want you to just see again that our processes, our mind processes, are guided by this. And the more we buy into this, and I think this is where maybe it becomes a little neurotic in us, is when we start buying too much into the fact that this is our life, that the wheel that spins is our lives, rather than the wheel is what's moving us. And that is a totally different point of view, completely different from when you think that you are the wheel, because you're not. You're going into the wheel willingly. And so the you is always there. The you is there at the beginning and at the end. That's the alpha and the omega. And so what we find is a couple of things. The first one is that we notice that reality is always changing. Reality is impermanent. That is the basis of our life, of our existence, is that everything is constantly changing. And so because it is changing, there is another element in reality, which is the element of opposition or polarity. And this polarity, we can see it in two ways. We can see it as something of a conflict, because two things are fighting each other, or we can see it from a broader point of view as unity. Those two things need each other to exist. And so if we can understand this and switch our perception between the conflict of polarity, or the, as Thich Nhat Hanh used to say, interbeing of polarity, then we have definitely transcended the idea that we are living in a struggling life, that we are living in a constant conflict. And so this is the basis of it. We need to understand that life is impermanent. And so we don't cling to things. We don't try to attach ourselves to things, because we know that everything is simply flowing and anything can happen. And you are that field of change as well. You are that field of potentiality, like Joseph Campbell said. Now, we have a lot of stories of the hero's journey. We find it in Hollywood, we find it in books, we find it in real life people's stories, that what we have on Jesus or even the Buddha. But just the Buddha, I think, is the best example of how there is a way of liberation of this. And in fact, it's thanks to the Buddha that we find ourselves liberated from this wheel of life and the constant cycles. And I'll get to that. So this is, again, the broader interpretation of the hero's journey that is always cycling in our minds as we encounter, experience situations in life. And the key distinction here is to start seeing that this is impossible to avoid. You cannot escape it, but you can be liberated from the perception that you are the wheel turning and that you are a victim of this wheel. Rather, you are the whole thing. Now, before I go any further, I want to touch on the Confederation philosophy that talks about the archetypical mind, and Kuo, who said something that I think is of a lot of value here to understand that also our mind is what's doing this, and it's not just reality itself. In April 22nd of 2007, Kuo said, "The archetypical arrangement of your third density is a hero's journey, let us say. It is a stately journey which is both very simple and amazingly complex. At the same time, the shape of this journey is somewhat complex because the energies that you carry are all of the energies that there are. You are a holographic bit of the one infinite creator, so that in every cell of your body, the creator is at its heart. The creator is also at the heart of your life, alive, as this instrument would say, and well, waiting in those sacred chambers of the inner heart to be discovered and to be used as the resource and asset that unconditional love always is." Here we find the archetypical mind and the creator itself. Those two things are so huge for me in this explanation, because the archetypical mind, what they call the archetypical arrangement of our third density, that archetypical mind is what's complex here. It's different because of how we humans perceive reality. And when we see that our experience, our hero's journey, is generated by the mind. There's actually the study of the tarot and the archetypical nature of the mind, body, spirit, which is something that is explored in the raw material, but I won't get into the details of that. That's it's all its own study, just like it is its own study in the hero's journey, and as well the last wheel that I'll talk about, which I think is the most relevant for me to begin this series of non-duality. But to put into context, the archetypical mind is, again, as explained in the tarot, is started by the fool, the choice, what they call the adept into wanting to explore reality. And it goes into all the different cards of the tarot and the different aspects of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Now, what's important here is to realize that without studying too much the tarot or the archetypical mind, is that our mind is created so it can have these experiences to it, so it can process these experiences the way it does. And this is why I say that as long as you have a mind, you will be in what seems to be the hero's journey. But it is our mind that is doing it. And our purpose is to seek the creator, is to seek the essence in us, to seek divinity. That is apotheosis, is our birth into the sacred realms. But how do we do that? You see, in the quote that I got from Kuo, what they say is that the creator is in every cell. They speak very poetically, if you have ever read them, and you can see it from this quote. But what they're saying is that the creator is everywhere, because the creator is consciousness. The creator is simple awareness. And even the word simple sounds like I'm demeaning what is awareness, but it's pure awareness. And that's what we are. Awareness is everywhere. It's not only a gift that we have. The only gift that we have is that we are aware that we are aware. And this is indeed the inspiriting of the human being, how we perceive the spirit. So when we contrast the mind as being something impermanent, always changing, producing all of these perceptions, and we can attach to those, and that's how, when we attach to the wheel, what happens? We keep rolling with it. And then when we go back into awareness, when we go back into consciousness and realize the creator in us, cultivate that part of ourselves, then we start seeing from the eyes of the creator and being liberated from the dragging of the wheel. This is how non-duality works, and I think is the most applicable thing we have in our current state of society, culture, the world in general, and we haven't explored it totally yet in the Western world. So this is why I'm so emphatic about talking about these topics, because I think they are phenomenal for this kind of work and liberating truly ourselves from this. And so the last thing I would say before getting into the last part of this video is that, you see, once we realize that we are this consciousness that is exploring itself, it's like an inside-out God, and we are perceiving the world as the body of God, and we are consciousness exploring this, then you realize that you are within your dream. This is your whole dream. You're dreaming this reality. And as any dream that you know is always changing, this reality is changing. But the only thing that doesn't change is the point of perception in your dream, that you that exists within the dream. But within the dream, everything in your dream is you, right? Is your own mind producing it. It is not a external projection, or is another person dreaming for you, or it's always you. So you are doing the same thing here. This whole universe is you, the consciousness that you are, not the ego perception that we all think we are, but the consciousness that you are. And you are that. You cannot explain anything about yourself because everything is so impermanent. The only thing you can explain for certain that you are is awareness, pure awareness. And from here, you can see that if this is indeed your dream, and you can treat it like that, and your heart should be able to discern this, wouldn't you want to love everything about yourself? What would you do in a dream where you wake up and you become lucid, as it were, and you realize that everything that is happening, you are creating? Wouldn't you want to love all of it? Wouldn't you want to create what you want in there? This is exactly what we're being invited by this. And anything else is just believing that we are something separate from the universe, which again is a possibility. It's okay for people to think that way, but it doesn't make sense in the long run. It doesn't make sense when you do self-inquiry. And so the last thing I want to share before I get into my last part is something else that Joseph Campbell said in this book, and this exact same page as well. In another question, Campbell was asked, the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about giving up the ego to transcend oneself into a larger whole. Maybe you have a comment about the theory or the evolution of man coming into a global community, the evolution of man's next step in the ego becoming the global consciousness rather than self-consciousness. Now, in a longer answer, Campbell said, the problem is not to eliminate ego, it's to turn ego and the judgment system of the moment into the servant of the self, not the dictator, but the vehicle for it to realize itself. It's a very nice balance, a very delicate one. A very important lesson here when talking about the ego and making it become our servant as opposed to the dictator. And it's not a problem of getting rid of the ego, as like some people like to say that they want to kill the ego, let the ego disappear. It's just to make it become our servant. In the same way, the wheel can become not our servant, but the vehicle in which we experience life. And so this brings me to the last wheel, which I think is the most beautiful one we have created, and that is the wheel of life, the actual wheel of life, that wheel of samsara, that is so complex, as you can see, that allows us to study it just like we could study the archetypical mind or the hero's journey itself. We can explore and study this wheel so much, and there are so many elements there that just deserve our attention as students of reality. And so this wheel of life is supposed to represent our mind as well, the way we perceive the world and how we feel in different aspects. Like I said, there are many things that we could explore in this wheel. It's a study on its own. But the one thing that stands out here for this video is that this is the wheel of becoming, what the Buddhists say, becoming somebody. And it has to do with all these different dimensions of how our mind works. Again, it's all in our minds. Everything that we're experiencing is because we have conditioned it in such a way that we perceive it like so. And so we can be in different realms, like they say in the Buddhist traditions, and the different parts of the wheel of life. And that is all powered by the ignorance and greed and the desire, that the anger that we have, all these things that are within ourselves that are potentiating this wheel and making it roll over and over again to spin forever. And well, this is just the nature of it. We don't have to be attached to the wheel, like I said. And the true realization here, without getting too complex or too esoteric, it is only to realize that you are that aware principle, that you are consciousness, that nothing else can get in your way, because you are that. You are not the changing aspects of this reality. You are the one perceiving everything. And this is what I want to explore in this series. There's a lot more videos that I'll keep doing, and I hope this makes sense. This helps you understand a little bit more, of course, this reality, because that's my intention. I have nothing else to say, but thank you so much for getting through this video. And if you have any comments, questions, please leave them in the bottom where all the comments are. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.